extremely well this evening, and I hope you're in the mood for some really scary stories. Now tonight's episode is going to be all about extremely terrifying mothers-in-law. I mean, obviously, if you marry someone, you also are attached to their family, right? And sometimes that's a blessing, and sometimes that's an absolute curse. So, with that being said, and of course, as always, without any further ado, let's get into tonight's stories, shall we? Alrighty. So, with this first story, I can't credit the Redditor who posted this because their account was deleted. But their story is called Mother-in-Law from Hell. I've been through some scary experiences, but this was the worst thing I feel that I've ever gone through in my life. I used to be very naive and innocent kind of person. I was the type of optimist who believed there was a touch of goodness in every heart. A dangerous mindset to be in. I realize now that seeing the world through my rose-colored glasses put a big, flashing red target on my back. Often when you think of scary stories involving creepy behavior and psychological abuse, you think of an occurrence from a stranger. In my case, it came from my mother-in-law. My husband's mother initially adored me, not for any reason other than thinking that I could easily be controlled. I was meek with a passive personality, so it made sense that I would come across like someone who could be easily influenced. Looking back on it, I cringe at how creepy the situation really was. For the sake of this story, I will call my mother-in-law by the name of Mrs. Psycho. At the beginning of my relationship with my husband, Mrs. Psycho and I were getting along great. Or so I thought. She'd take me shopping, give me compliments about my hair, and girl stuff like that. As the relationship with my partner grew more serious, she'd rant and rave to everyone in our neighborhood about how much she adored me and how I was like the daughter that she had never had. So naturally, I thought things were progressing positively. But certain things were just really off about Mrs. Psycho. I noticed little tidbits of her behavior at parties and neighborhood social gatherings. She'd sulk in a corner and I'd chalk it up as her being socially awkward or anxious. But looking back at it now, I noticed that she was always whimpering about something negative going on in her life. How she fell off her bike and hurt her elbow while riding through a construction zone. How one neighbor complained about her parking in front of his house. Losing her job because she didn't get along with a co-worker. The list went on and on. In every story, she portrayed herself as a victim of some unusual circumstances. Now, one huge red flag that my mind didn't understand at the time was the story she was always telling about her son, my partner's brother. She'd say some really disturbing things about how he'd held her, my partner, and his dad hostage in their own home, and how he'd physically punched their father in the face. The way she described the story made it sound like my partner's brother was a bully to the whole family, and my partner didn't seem to think it was quite as severe as she was making it sound. Regardless, in all her wild stories and accusations about him, she always scolded her son in ways that I just can't imagine ever scolding my own child. What my husband and I didn't fully interpret at the time was the underlying problem, which wasn't necessarily his brother, but the woman who had been a driving force for the insanity behind the behaviour. Psychological abuse can trigger emotional responses in very unpredictable and sometimes disturbing ways. Mrs. Psycho's behaviour became evidently creepy after our engagement. She showed signs of unhealthy enmeshment. First, she was angry that we didn't tell her immediately when we'd gotten engaged. Then she was angry when we changed the wedding date without asking for her permission first. She expressed a desire for my future husband and I to live in the upstairs of her house and pay her rent. Absolutely not. No thanks. We told her that we can afford our own home and we want to start a family, so that wouldn't work out anyway. The fury in her eyes was frightening. She would look normal one moment, then if you told her something she didn't want to hear, her eyes almost went black with rage. The memory of her eyes still sends me with a frightening chill down my spine. From there, she became increasingly controlling. Mrs. Psycho and her husband, Mr. Psycho, would start showing up to our house every other day or so. I started counting how long they could go without having to see us, and that number came to a mere 3 days. There was no privacy, and I felt that I had to close the curtains over our windows every night. I just had that uneasy feeling, you know. I locked the bedroom door as a routine before bed, just to be on the extra safe side. See, and that's when it becomes an issue, because locking your bedroom door before you go to sleep may be safer for intruders, but if there's ever a fire, that's actually a hazard. Now, despite our relationship being pleasant in the beginning, I noticed that I was now feeling like I was treading on eggshells around Mrs. Psycho. Or rather, landmines. It seemed like anything I said was offensive to her, no matter how innocent. I realized I couldn't talk to her like I used to be able to when me and her son were just dating. I remembered when we'd been able to have nice, in-depth conversations, and I had allowed myself to be vulnerable with her. I confided in her about how I had a lot of social anxiety, and that her son came into my life during a time that I was suffering from crippling depression. I talked about how he'd brought a ray of sunshine into my life, thinking that speaking kindly about her son would please her. But no, she just had this unfeeling, glazed look. She had this hobby of going to auctions and buying and selling little knickknacks, buttons and stuff like that. She would get very proud of her collections of things that I sort of thought were junk, but to be polite, I told her I saw beauty in these things, hoping to get back on her good side. There were some creepy dolls in the mix too, including this horrifying looking vampire doll with piercing red eyes. She said she'd had that doll for years and used to scare her sons with it when they were little kids. Okay. She laughed at the memory, and the sound had an eerie, satanical vibe to it. Okay, that is actually disturbing. I'm not gonna lie. Even if that laugh hadn't been satanic, I still think that is absolutely disturbing that you just casually throw into the conversation that, yep, that is the creepy, terrifying doll I used to scare my children with, and then you laugh. Wild. As if this wasn't enough to freak me out, she then told me this story about how a female co-worker had complained about her to the HR department at her company. To seek revenge on this woman, Mrs. Psycho wrote a letter that was meant for the co-worker's husband, telling him that she was cheating on him. To remain as anonymous as possible, she told me how she had slipped on a pair of black gloves and drove the letter to a faraway location so that her address couldn't be traced. See, if this isn't serial killer behavior, then I don't know what is. I remember feeling very uneasy about her story, wondering how she could get angry enough to drive hours away just to cause emotional harm to another human being. There came a point after hearing this story when I didn't want to be left alone with my partner's mum anymore. My partner tried to talk to his parents about how I was feeling like I was on eggshells around them, but they flipped the narrative to say that they were the ones feeling like they were walking on eggshells around me. During this time, I painstakingly realized that psychological torture exists in the form of extreme invalidation. That is also known as gaslighting. This is textbook example of gaslighting. Not having your feelings acknowledged can really drive a person crazy. It was then when I felt a little more clued into what may have happened to Mrs. Psycho's other son. I can't be sure because I never met the guy, but I think he was driven mad by his mother's severe emotional neglect. Now, she was pulling the same tricks on me and my partner, gaslighting us into believing that we were just too sensitive. When my husband and I started figuring out that something was off, things got even creepier. His parents started showing up to our house to corner us into submission. What I mean is, they would tell us stories to make themselves seem like victims so that we would give in to the demands of what they wanted at the time. If we denied their requests, they'd use psychological manipulation by telling us that we were uncaring or ungrateful. One demonstration of this manipulation was when I became pregnant. I explained that the smell of pizza made me extremely sick, but this was completely ignored. When Mrs. Psycho insisted that we go to a pizza restaurant for her birthday, I was confused with was in the same predicament. Somehow, I think we sensed that something bad would happen to us if we declined. This is also because Mrs. Psycho's husband and her sister had contacted us, telling us explicitly that we weren't allowed to say no to our dinner invitations anymore. They explained it like saying no really hurts our feelings, but there was something else there that I can't quite explain, something hidden beneath the surface that sounded really threatening. I had no idea why, but I just did not feel safe. Then, only 2 weeks after giving birth to our daughter, I had the creepiest interaction of my life. Mrs. Psycho caught me alone while I was on my front porch. The weather was really nice, so I was rocking with my baby in one of the outdoor chairs. She came up to the doorstep and assumed a seat in a chair next to me. Then, in a quiet, ominous voice, she said to me, "You have to share her, you know." Her black eyes flicked to the infant in my arms. I know what you might be thinking, but this wasn't said in a cute, excited new grandma kind of way. Her voice sounded cold and possessive, with certain passive-aggressive intent behind the statement. I naturally clutched my arms around my daughter tighter, feeling a protective instinct take over me. Mrs. Psycho had expressed to me before that she had always wanted to have a daughter, but was only ever able to have sons. Maybe I was being influenced by the postpartum hormones or just overall feeling paranoid, but a disturbing thought occurred to me that she might want to get rid of me somehow, to have my daughter to herself. I later told my husband about the bizarre interaction with his mom and how I couldn't keep up with the heavy psychological demands of his parents anymore. It was all taking a strange emotional toll on me, as well as a strain on our marriage. And I still couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Nevertheless, they were causing us a lot of stress, which was impacted on me all the more while I was trying to adapt to my role as a new mother. They even restricted me in bizarre ways, telling me that I was not allowed to refer to our daughter as my baby. I'd previously posted on Facebook about how excited and happy I was to be a new mom. I posted a side-by-side picture of me with my daughter with the caption, "She has my eyes," which was meant to be light-hearted and innocent. My mother-in-law commented on that post with, "My son had something to do with it too, ... which not only put a damper on the mood, but also just felt plain creepy. Like, why did she have to mention something so obvious? It was almost as if my happiness made her more enraged. I really felt like I was starting to go crazy. The stress was enough to make me physically sick. At first, my husband hesitated when I told him about my concerns, stating the usual spiel that was natural for him to say, that they were his parents and he couldn't just drop contact with them. But something in his voice contained fear, and it wouldn't take long before he would realize how effed up the situation actually was. The incident that drove him to the point of cutting off his parents happened when they cornered us in our own living room, demanding that we watch their unruly dog while they went on vacation for 5 days. My husband almost caved but stayed firm when he told them, "No, we can't. We have a 2-month-old baby to look after." The murderous glare his mum then shot at me was intense and enough to make me crawl out of my skin. You know that look someone gives before they are about to attack? It looked like something like that from the movies, very primal and hateful. I thought for sure that she was about to lunge at me and wring her hands around my neck. I was terrified. Mr. and Mrs. Psycho eventually left our house, but they were clearly angry that they weren't able to convince us to conform to their will. My husband and I had a dark, suspicious feeling that something bad was about to happen. First, we received lengthy emails from Mrs. Psycho, mostly insulting me. She said she thought that I was brainwashing her son, and she went on to portray herself as a victim. She used the knowledge of my anxiety disorder to make an argument that I was mentally unstable and dangerous. She threatened to post about me on Facebook and make our life a living hell if we didn't apologize for deviating from what she wanted. At the same time, she told me that I was dead to her and listed all the mistakes I've ever made in the past, as well as criticizing all my faults. I'd be lying if I said this didn't sting. My husband and I needed space to recover from the emotional wounds that she had inflicted on us. We remained silent, not wanting to engage with her any further. My husband and I were pretty scared, as well as being hurt, spending most of our days cooped up in our bedroom, not knowing what to expect. But we stayed strong through the process of separating from the toxic relationship. Mrs. Psycho proceeded to make good on her threat, posting about me publicly on Facebook. She said I was batshit crazy. She even went a step further, saying that I had borderline personality disorder in all caps. This came out of completely nowhere. She knew I had anxiety, but I'd never mentioned anything to do with borderline because I wasn't diagnosed with that at all. It didn't end there though. She also posted a dramatic story of how we had banned her from seeing her grandchild. An active smear campaign against me ensued as Mr. and Mrs. Psycho actually went door to door to everyone's house in my community, posing as good citizens to warn everyone about their extremely dangerous, manipulative, 5-foot-tall daughter-in-law. This is insane. What? Where do you get the balls to do that? My neighbours didn't react the way that was expected though. They were more wary of her than of me. Instead of ruining my reputation, which was the desired effect, most people in my neighbourhood were majorly creeped out by Mrs. Psycho's efforts. They were equally creeped out by Mr. Psycho's willingness to go along with the whole thing. I guess after years of being beaten down with his wife's abuse, he was just an empty shell of a man, a flying monkey to the proverbial wicked witch. There are few doctors and therapists in my neighbourhood who couldn't officially diagnose her since she wasn't their patient, but they said off the record that they believed Mrs. Psycho may have been projecting. I really thought they were going to say that she's a narcissist because, it's quite clear that she is. Meaning that she was, in essence, confessing that she is potentially dangerous and volatile while pinning it on me. This, alongside with some stories of Mrs. Psycho's interactions with other people in our neighbourhood, confirmed that something was disturbingly off with this lady. This information made the situation all the more unsettling when Mr. and Mrs. Psycho showed up to our house, living survivor in the living room with our baby when the doorbell rang. He crept to the front window to peer behind the curtain to see who it was. I could see fear on his face. "It's my parents," he said, and my blood ran cold. I immediately ran with the baby upstairs, pausing only to tell him that it was his choice whether to answer the door or not, since they are his parents, but that me and the baby would be hidden away. As I made my way up the stairs, my husband hovered by the front door, conflicted. He didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, I could hear jostling at the front door, as if his parents were trying to force their way inside our house with a spare key. I thank God to this day that we had just changed the locks a few days before, so they couldn't get in. I proceeded to run upstairs and closed the bedroom door behind me, locking me and the baby inside. I held my daughter close, my heart thudding wildly against my chest. When there was a knock on the bedroom door, I reacted with a jolt. It scared me shitless. My husband's voice on the other side calmed me down though. He told me he didn't answer the door. He was trembling when I unlocked the door to let him in. His face was pale. He showed me a text message from his dad saying, "Anyone home?" followed by another text from his mother later saying, "You're a coward, hiding behind your keyboard." I don't know what would have happened if my husband had chosen to answer the door, but I shudder to think about it. My husband and I both blocked them after that. Phone numbers, social media accounts, everything. They moved away to another state. Thank God. We have since been no contact with his parents for almost 2 years now, and our daughter is growing in a loving environment, free of toxicity. I'm really glad. Sadly, we have had to block some of my husband's other family because they kept telling us we should talk to my in-laws, which, by the way, feels a lot like being told, "Please contact your abuser." For this reason, I sometimes feel like it would have almost been better to be physically abused than mentally abused, because then there would be some form of visible evidence of the harm that they had inflicted. In the meantime, they have so far made no attempts to contact us with an apology or anything. Instead, they once reached out with a nasty, "Have a shitty anniversary, you two are a match made in hell." That is absolutely disgusting, I'm sorry, which only further secured our decision to cut contact with them. I have since armed myself with knowledge so that I will be less naive about creepy behavior in the future. I've studied up on narcissism and the negative psychological impact that some people can have on others through gaslighting and invalidation. I hope everyone listening out there may be aware that not all abuse is physical. What a horrible story. I feel for this woman and obviously her husband. And it is so sad that in 2023 we apparently still feel the need to say, "Oh, I wish that the abuse that I'd suffered had been physical, so at least there would be some visible evidence and people would believe that I've been abused." As if psychological abuse isn't a thing, as if mental suffering isn't suffering. I find it sad that that still happens in 2023. decision to make, and I'm glad that her husband stood by her as well. And he didn't choose his mum's side, because that, funnily enough, happens really often. Alrighty, after what I think was the longest story we've ever had on this channel, I have one more for you guys, and it is disturbing. So this one was originally posted by a Redditor called Just Buzzed 1001, and their story is called Why I Divorced My Wife. I have to get this story off of my chest, for as it is so effed up and still creeps me out to this day, and it all came back to me tonight like it was yesterday. My wife at that time and I used to visit her parents in a state up north, about a 4-hour drive away. It was an old, nice big house with rolling green hills in the backyard and big oak trees. We always stayed in the apartment above the garage, but this trip they told us they were renovating the apartment and had us stay in one of the bedrooms. We usually stayed for a few days, so we had luggage. I was putting our clothes in the dresser and I came across some pictures in the bottom drawer. My wife was downstairs with her parents. Anyways, these pictures shocked me, and I'm pretty sure they were not meant to be found. They were pictures of, and now I'm gonna have to reword it slightly because we are on YouTube. So basically these pictures were of the Redditors' parents-in-law, and in the pictures they were using certain objects like a tennis racket, a wine bottle, a stuffed toy, for things that they aren't made for, if you know what I mean. And they were using the wide side of each of these objects to do the things that they aren't made for. Okay. Now, I didn't look at the pictures anymore, I just quickly put them back into the drawer. The second creepy thing about the pictures was the smiles that they had on their faces. Here we go again. Like in the horror movies, with like the girl's lips are cut on each side to make the smile wider. Or that clown in American Horror Story, just nutty smiles, like they were almost painted on their faces. Now, what the F did I just see? I know like no one was around when I was looking at them or standing in the doorway watching me. This adds relevance to what I'm about to tell you in a bit. The third effed up thing about the pictures is that her dad was retired from a very high profile job and very conservative, and I could never ever see him doing something like that, let alone her mum participating. Okay, so I walked downstairs, freaking out a bit, but questions in my head, like, did she see me looking at the pictures? That's too crazy coincidental, and I know that all of them were downstairs at the time. I'm just saying, but there may have been cameras. You never know. Anyways, the next day, I'm the last one up and walking downstairs, and my wife is really mad at me at breakfast. It was like she picked a fight with me for no reason. I think it was about the supposed shoddy job I did fixing a wall at their house the previous summer, but that was bullshit and she knew it. They knew it and I knew it. I do very good work, but she kept on about it, and her parents just sat there and kind of smiled like we were arguing, and like that was just nothing. I remember looking at all of them like, what the hell is going on? It was like a big conspiracy almost. We never argued like that before. Never. And even if I had built that wall out of cardboard, something like that would have never turned into an argument the way it did. We all were quite laid back people, and that would have been a joking kind of thing. But my wife was on a different level that morning, and her parents were like twice as weird, just sitting there like they were taking pleasure in it. That freaked me out even more than the yelling act my wife was putting on. I was just so traumatized at that point by the whole situation that I just went upstairs, packed, and left the house with no objection from the wife or the in-laws, not a word then. That was super weird too. I got into the car and ended up driving back home for 4 hours by myself, getting more and more creeped out with each mile, my anxiety building. Was it the effing pictures? Did Mom manipulate the whole thing because of her weird American Horror Story ass the night before? No phone call from the wife the whole way home, no nothing. I did leave a WTF is wrong with you people today message on her parents' landline. It was 100% weird in that kitchen that morning. By the time I got home, I remember I was ready to leave my wife for sure and never, ever wanted to see my in-laws' faces again, even though I liked them both a lot before and we got along really well. My wife came home a couple of days later, I think. We made up on the phone and she apologized, I think, but I wasn't there by the time she got home. Long story short, we got divorced not long after that. She never did really explain why she jumped on me like that morning. By then, I didn't care how much we invested in that marriage or how beautiful she was or how much I still loved her. I was just too creeped out, and I knew things probably would never be the same again, at least in my head. I never did see my in-laws again, or my ex-wife, or ever tell her what I saw in that drawer that day and what I saw that night, and it's been almost 20 years. Honestly, the first comment on this story made me gasp, okay? The top comment says, "Have you ever thought about who took those pictures for them?" That really made me gasp, because from the story, it did sound like the Redditor's wife was somehow in on it. I mean, the way she was acting completely out of assuming here that they know each other's personalities, so I trust OB when he says that, his wife would never respond that way, and it was all very weird and out of the ordinary. I mean, honestly, if he had found those photos, those compromising photos, by accident, there is two ways that it could have ended well, right? The first one is nobody ever mentions it again and everyone moves on. The second one is, the parents profusely apologise, say that it, wasn't meant to be there and he wasn't meant to see those, and like, oh, I'm really sorry if I made you uncomfortable, and you move on. But the way they all acted is extremely suspicious. The wife being completely, acting completely differently to what she'd normally do, and then the parents just sat there watching and smiling as if they were enjoying it. Very strange to me. Also, this story was made 100 times creepier for sure by the fact that they were wearing really creepy smiles in those pictures. Now, is it possible that the OB dreamt that the mum was standing in the doorway with a tennis racket and a bottle of wine? Sure. It is possible that that was a dream, but it must have been freaking terrifying nonetheless. Honestly, I really hope it was a dream, because if she actually did that, that is nightmare fuel. Something for a horror movie, for sure. Wow. I mean, a lot of people in the comments are also saying, oh, you should have talked to your wife about it. Why divorce over this? But like I said, when you get together with someone, especially when you marry someone, you are also tied to their family, right? And if you really cannot have a healthy relationship with that family, then, you have to kind of consider whether or not it is worth pursuing your relationship with that person or carrying on with your marriage with that person. You have to live with those people for the rest of your life, for the rest of theirs. Or the other option, and that is a really hard one, is to completely cut them off, like we heard in the first story. But then both partners, both people in the marriage have to be on board with that, and it doesn't happen very often. So yeah, I don't blame the OB, considering he was so traumatized, and he said that in his mind everything had changed and it couldn't be put right. I don't blame the OB at all for divorcing. I'm sorry. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but it is what it is. Let me know what you think of these stories in the comments below. These were wild, right? Sadly, that was it for tonight's scary stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for choosing to hang out with me again tonight. If you like these kinds of videos and you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and leaving a comment down below. It really helps, and I also really like reading you guys' comments. Now, if I'm not mistaken, all there is left for me to do is to wish you a very